Dr. Bill Crawford here, psychologist, speaker, author of 8 books, host of 2 PBS specials. Here again to bring you another tip on how to help you create the life you want. Specifically, how to use my life from the top of the mind philosophy to bring more clarity, confidence, creativity into everything you do. Today I want to look at the subject of criticism. Taking it, how do we deal with it? Hey, we all get it from time to time. But then how do we know what to trust, I think a lot of times we find ourselves feeling resentful about the criticism and trying to in some way kind of deny it. And that's understandable when it's not coming from a trustworthy source. There is a quote that I'm sending out to those 6,000 people on my quote list. By the way, if you'd like to receive one of my favorite quotes each week, all you got to do is go to my website, billcrawfordphd.com, or just Google Bill Crawford Ph.D. I'll come up on the first page. Hit the subscribe button, put your name, email address in, and each week I will send you one of my favorite quotes, along with 2 or 3 paragraphs about how to apply that quote to life, along with a link to this video, or a video each week. So this quote is one I found on Pinterest. It's from The Great Unknown, and it says, "Never take criticism from someone you wouldn't go to for advice." I like that. Because I think if we look at the person who's criticizing us and ask ourselves the question, okay, is this a person I respect? Is this a person I would go to for advice? Is this a person I would send someone I love to for advice? If so, then maybe there's some value there. Because I think we don't want to be blind to any kind of constructive feedback. If there's something that someone sees that we don't, that can improve whatever we're doing, terrific. The challenge is when we're being criticized by someone that we don't respect, someone we would not go to for advice, and yet, have you noticed, boy, it just seems to trigger resentment. I experienced this as a speaker. I work with an organization that speaks to a lot of CEOs, and every time I do a training for one of these CEO groups, I get rated from 1 to 5 on content, applicability, and presentation skills. I'm pleased to say that most of my ratings are 5s, but every once in a while, I'll get a low score. And I find myself kind of resenting that and looking at that. So what I've learned to do is to say, okay, who probably gave me that score? Is this someone I would go to for advice? Is this someone I trust? As a speaker who's been doing this for about 30 years, I'm pretty good at sensing kind of who's getting it and who's not, who's really engaged and who's not. And if I get a sense of who isn't, and they're one of these folks that give me one of these low scores, I can ask myself, would I go to that person for advice about the topic that I'm presenting on, or how to create a really impactful presentation? Almost always the answer is no. Now what's fascinating is that doesn't always make the resentment go away. So I think in order for us to deal with that kind of internal resentment, we've got to go a little bit deeper. Those of you who follow my life from the top of the mind philosophy, we got these 3 parts of the brain. Lower part of the brain is called the brainstem. That's a fight or flight part. Upper 80% of the brain is called the neocortex. I call it the top of the mind. This is where we have access to our best interpersonal skills, problem-solving skills, clarity, confidence, creativity, compassion, etc. Middle brain is called the limbic system. And this middle brain is responsible for keeping us alive and safe as a species. So it's always kind of scanning the environment looking for anything negative, or another way to put that, it pays more attention to the negative than it does to the positive, because the negative has the potential for a threat. Works great in a dangerous situation where we really need to pay attention to the negative. Doesn't work so great when we're trying to deal with criticism, especially if it's from someone that we wouldn't go to for advice, someone that we don't trust necessarily or respect. And yet, what happens is this middle brain will trigger resentment. And so in some ways, we could go a little bit deeper when we find ourselves feeling this resentment and ask the question, do I really want to trust this part of the brain to be a guide for my thoughts and decisions and behavior and feelings? Would I recommend this resentment to someone I love? I love those questions. Those are what I call top of the mind questions, or neocortex questions. They engage this upper 80% of the brain and allow me to make an evaluation of whether or not I want to hang on to this resentment. There's a quote that I use in my seminars that says, holding on to anger and resentment is like grasping a hot coal while blaming our misery on the person who started the fire. So the person who started the fire is the person who criticized us or gave us a low score or whatever. Do we really want to hold on to that anger and resentment? Because that's really kind of minimizing our ability to create the life we want. We can't create the life we want from this lower 20% of the brain. What we want to do is shift up to that upper 80% of the brain. So rather than trying to not feel resentful, which is trying to kind of use worry and fear to deal with worry and fear, I suggest instead we shift to another question. Okay, if this is not a part of the brain that I want to trust in terms of how I feel and what I do, what part of the brain do I want to trust? What part of me do I want to trust? And again, would I recommend a new way of thinking about this to someone I love? If someone I love came to me and said, hey, you know, I'm feeling this and I got criticized and I'm feeling this, what would I tell them? So I think what we can do is begin to look externally and ask that question, you know, do I really want to take advice or criticism from the person I would not go to for advice? No. Do I really want to let this reactive, negative part of who I am, kind of overly negative part of who I am, guide my thoughts, decisions, and behavior? Would I really recommend that to someone I love? Is there something to learn from the situation? Terrific. And what if we were approaching this from a perspective of improvement and learning versus fear and resentment and criticism? I think that's what we would recommend to someone we love. So what I'm going to encourage you to do is think about that as we go forward. We're all going to find ourselves facing criticism from time to time. Let's ask these top-of-the-mind questions. Would I go to this person for advice? Do I really want that part of the brain to be the guide for my thoughts, decisions, and behavior? And if the answer is no and no, then we flip it to, okay, who would I go to for advice? Are there people that I trust that I could run this by? Even in my mind, if I ran it by them, what would they say? Or if I were giving advice to someone I love, what would I say? What if we could trust the best of who we are to make a decision about how we improve and how we think about life? Would that help us create the life we want? My hope is you're enjoying these experiences, these videos. I'm having a great time bringing them to you. If you like them, please hit the like button. You know how all the social media love it if you like it. Feel free to follow me on YouTube and Pinterest and Twitter and iTunes and Facebook and all the folks. I post these everywhere. And again, each week I send out one of those to those 6,000 folks on my quote list. So until next time, here's to you, bringing more clarity, confidence, creativity into everything you do. And I look forward to seeing you in the future.